Welcome back to the World Trade Webcast. Our guest this week is Garrett Workman, Associate Director of the Atlantic Council and author of the newly released report from the Council, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, Big Opportunities for Small Business. Garrett, I was hoping today that we could elaborate more on the importance of SMEs to the U.S. and EU economies.
Sure. SMEs make up the vast majority of all companies and actually account for most employment in both the United States and the EU. It's important to note, first of all, that the US and EU actually define SMEs slightly differently, where the US SME is any company that has less than 500 employees, and in Europe it's if they have less than 250. That being said, both economies are really dominated by these small companies. In the last 20 years, for example, in the United States, SMEs have created over 14.3 million new jobs, whereas the larger companies have kind of remained stagnant and remained flat. So these are actually the real economic growth engines and job creation engines on both sides of the economy. And actually, too, if you look at the share of the proportion of number of companies that are small on both sides. In the US, it's over 99.9% of all companies have less than 500 employees, and the EU, it's 99.8. And the reason that TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, could be so important for them is these are actually companies which are really underrepresented in international trade and exports. On the EU side, only 13% of companies are currently exporting beyond their own, beyond the EU itself. Even though it's obviously a much smaller market than the U.S., only 13% of them are exporting outside of Europe. And on the U.S. side, actually less than half of 1% of all U.S. SMEs are exporting to Europe. So there's a huge opportunity for them to take more advantage of this. And like I was saying in the last segment, with the internet now, with things like eBay, Amazon, Etsy, it's really easy to find your clients, potential clients and customers, even if they don't live in the same country. But the problem right now is just understanding and navigating the different regulatory rules and barriers and making sure that your boxes are labeled correctly and making sure that your products have the right safety certifications and things like that. Sometimes it can be really difficult. So if we manage to have an ambitious TTIP agreement where we can sort of understand that both sides are very highly regulated and highly safe markets, and if they can sort of find a way to make sure that we can sort of mutually recognize the rules and regulations where appropriate, it can be much easier for those companies to export. And like I said, since so few of them are exporting today, there's a huge opportunity for growth there.
Excellent. That's a really good perspective. And do you have a sense for what kind of an increase we might see as a result of a better framework for trade between the U.S. and EU? Do you think we could see a doubling of SMEs from each side? Is there any sort of a yardstick for measuring that?
It's kind of hard to say, obviously, without knowing the contours of what actually will be in the agreement. But the Atlantic Council last year, we did a study on how exports and jobs would grow in each state, assuming a pretty ambitious TTIP, which we defined as eliminating tariffs across the Atlantic, reducing regulatory differences by 25%, and also reducing government procurement restrictions by 25%. And we saw that every state in the U.S. would grow both jobs and exports. And it depends on what industries you have in your state, but the exports ranged in growth from about 7% to about 125%. So there's huge opportunities that are there. I think for SMEs, you'll see even a higher percentage of growth in terms of exports and potentially jobs, just because the large companies are already well integrated on both sides of the Atlantic. I don't think any of the big companies are going to stop operating in one market or the other if TTIP doesn't happen. Clearly, they're already there and they're already doing well. But TTIP really is, I would argue, basically all about small businesses. This is an opportunity for small companies to take advantage of a market that they should be operating in already, or they would like to be. Our study that we did, we asked them a question of, if you currently export to Europe or the U.S. or not, and if not, why not? And very few of them gave us an answer of they didn't want to. That there was more of a problem of they didn't know which customs they had to pay. They didn't know which safety administrations they needed to sign up with. They didn't understand the rules, and they all wanted to play by the rules. Obviously, no company wants to be getting into some sort of international litigation over this. But the problem is that even if you want to know the rules, it's really hard to find out what they are. So TTIP is a really good opportunity for us to sort of streamline that and make it easier for them to understand. And then I think you would see a big increase in the number of companies that are exporting.
Very good. Thanks, Garrett. And message to policymakers, TTIP means jobs for U.S. companies.
Absolutely.
And that's all the time we have today, but we're going to continue our discussion with Garrett tomorrow about the proposed U.S.-EU Free Trade Agreement, TTIP. For our latest schedule of upcoming episodes, subscribe to us with any of the links below, and bookmark this page. All of our previous webcasts can be found right here at thinkglobal.com/webcast. And thanks for watching.